Hello Internet, and welcome back to my series of film reviews. Last time we covered Joker Folie à Deux, and now we're here to take a look at the first film that's part of the DC Extended Universe, Man of Steel. Since the DC Universe is about to be rebooted with Creature Commandos and James Gunn's Superman, not to mention the second season of Peacemaker, I thought I'd take a look back at the DCEU. What went right, what went wrong, and everything in between. I was originally going to do one of those unscripted retrospectives on the entire franchise as a whole, but at the last second, I thought to myself, why don't I do reviews of each movie in the franchise? Now granted, I already reviewed Black Adam and Blue Beetle in this format, and I reviewed The Flash as Sonic and Shonik, but I will be revisiting Black Adam and Blue Beetle to see if my thoughts have changed since I first saw them in theaters. When I first reviewed Black Adam and Blue Beetle, those reviews were spoiler-free, but when I revisit them, I will be including some spoilers here and there. That also means I will be reviewing The Flash in this format too, so that means I'll have reviewed The Flash twice on this channel, same with Black Adam and Blue Beetle. I will be covering each and every film in the DCEU, from Man of Steel to Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. And yes, this will include the theatrical cut of Justice League. Fun fact, after watching Zack Snyder's Justice League for the first time, I threw my DVD copy of Justice League in the trash instead of donating it, because I didn't want anyone else to have to suffer through how truly shitty that movie is. I shit you not, that actually happened. But I'm still going to review it either way. I'll just have to stream it on Max. So that means I will be making two separate videos on the theatrical cut of Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League. I can confirm that I will not be covering the first season of Peacemaker on this channel. But once I make it up to the Suicide Squad, I will give my thoughts on the first season of Peacemaker there. But that video will mostly be a video talking about the Suicide Squad, while I give my brief thoughts on the first season of Peacemaker at some point in the video. But anyway, back to business. Released on June 14th, 2013, and directed by Zack Snyder, Man of Steel is a reboot of the Superman film series, and the first entry in the DCEU. The most recent time we saw Superman on screen prior to Man of Steel was Superman Returns with Brandon Routh, which I will be reviewing next spring along with the Christopher Reeve Superman movies to get ready for James Gunn's Superman with David Corenswet. This movie stars Henry Cavill as Clark Kent, or Kal-El, or as he's best known, Superman. We also have Amy Adams as Lois Lane, Russell Crowe as Kal-El's biological father Jor-El, Michael Shannon as General Zod, Kevin Costner as his adopted father Jonathan Kent, and Diane Lane as his adopted mother Martha.
Why did you say that name?
And yes, we will get to that fucking meme when we get to Batman v Superman in the next video. And we have Morpheus himself, Lawrence Fishburne, as Perry White, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet, which is pretty much the DC equivalent of the Daily Bugle from the Spider-Man series. I was originally not going to review this movie to get ready for James Gunn's Superman, but I changed my mind at the last second because I wanted to revisit the DCEU. What went right, what went wrong, all that jazz. I gave a brief summary on my thoughts on each movie in my first review of Black Adam. But as I talk about each individual movie, I will go into more detail with my thoughts as I cover all 16 films. Yes, I said 16, because Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League are two different movies. Just because they share a similar plot doesn't mean they're the same fucking movie. This video will contain spoilers to Man of Steel, so if you have not seen Man of Steel, please do so before watching this video. But if you have, enjoy the video. So anyway, here's my full thoughts on the film that started a franchise that was doomed to fail, and rebooted the story of not a bird, not a plane, but Superman. This is Man of Steel. Man of Steel is told in a non-linear narrative, meaning that it often cuts to flashbacks of past events to Clark Kent's younger years for no rhyme or reason. So I'll do the best I can to cover the entire film and not get lost or confused, unlike this entire fucking franchise that was so inconsistent in its autumn years. Anyway, let's get started before I question everything. This film shows us an entirely new look at the planet Krypton, or as Marlon Brando calls it, Krypton.
On the woman Ursa, whose perversions and unreasoning hatred of all mankind have threatened even the children of the planet Krypton.
The film starts off with the birth of Kal-El, just as the entire planet of Krypton is going to shit and is about to be Death Starred into smithereens. But instead of the Death Star, it's just an unstable core. This version of Krypton kind of feels like Pandora from the Avatar films. And yes, I will be reviewing Avatar Fire and Ash next year. Kind of like how I reviewed Avatar The Way of Water a couple years back. One thing that the Kryptonians keep raving on about is the Codex. It is a genetic codex that Jor-El, played by Russell Crowe, infuses into his newborn son Kal-El. And while the entire planet is going to shit, General Zod, played by Michael Shannon, is conducting a coup d'etat. The Council of Krypton is disbanded by Zod and his followers, including Faora, played by German actress Antje Traue. She and Michael Shannon reprise their roles in The Flash. Why the Flash had to fight off against General Zod instead of his usual rogues gallery, I have no fucking clue. But that right there just ruins the movie. That's like Captain America fighting off against the Green Goblin. It just feels weird, and not in a good way. Kal-El's birth is Krypton's first natural birth in centuries for reasons unknown. And just as Jor-El sends his son off-world, he's then killed by General Zod. And for the rest of the movie, Jor-El is seen through holograms assisting not only an adult Clark Kent, but also Lois Lane when she gets captured by Zod's forces, and he helps her escape as if he was a guide in a random video game tutorial. And after Kal-El is sent away, Zod and his followers are detained and are banished to the Phantom Zone. Not unlike the Lego Batman movie where a bunch of pop culture villains owned by Warner Brothers are detained. Anyone who is familiar with the lore of Superman should know what it is. But then, after Krypton proceeds to
blow up into smithereens and spew my tiny symphony,
Zod and his followers are free from the Phantom Zone and plot for years to go after Kal-El to extract the genetic codex. Soon afterwards, Kal-El lands in the town of Smallville and is discovered by Jonathan and Martha Kent, played by Kevin Costner and Diane Lane respectively. We don't really see that in the movie. And then, random flashbacks that happen for no reason. Like an adult Clark Kent saving an oil rig in the middle of the ocean, where unfortunately, we don't see an appearance from Aquaman. We don't get to see him until Diana Prince looks at the files on metahumans in Batman v Superman. And another flashback is when a young Clark is in school and his powers start to kick in, such as his X-ray vision and his Homelander heat vision. Except Superman's heat vision in these movies does not leave people in a bloody mess with severed limbs and whatnot. And he even saves a school bus as it drives off a bridge and into the river below. And one of the other kids on the bus, his mother finds out what Clark did, and Jonathan advises him to keep his powers hidden, fearing that society would reject him, like it did Arthur Fleck in Joker. It is then that Jonathan reveals to Clark that he is from another world, and that he's adopted. Later on in his life, Jonathan is blown away by a tornado, and he accepts his fate rather than having Clark use his powers to save him. And Clark has been feeling guilty over his death since. Years later, an adult Clark finds more about where he comes from, and after saving people from the exploding oil rig and falling into the ocean, he makes it to dry land and steals some clothes without any repercussions whatsoever. He overhears a bunch of soldiers talking about something they discovered in the ice up north. That, of course, being a Kryptonian scout ship. And after confronting a rude trucker at a diner he works at, he makes his way up north to the ice in which the ship is located. Enter Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams. She's a photographer working for the Daily Planet in the city of Metropolis. There is an ongoing investigation on the object found in the Arctic, which turns out to be the scout ship. Clark enters the ship, and he is greeted by a hologram of his biological father, Jor-El. There, he learns more about where he came from, that he was sent to Earth to inspire hope and to guide its people. Lois then follows Clark, curious to find out what the hell is going on. She's then wounded by the ship's defense drone after triggering the ship's defense system. But then, Clark saves her with his Superman powers and cauterizes the wound with his heat vision. And then afterwards, military forces stationed around the site are surprised to see the ice cracking and the ship taking off. Lois returns to Metropolis to write an article about what she witnessed in the Arctic, but Perry White, played by Lawrence Fishburne, denounces it as a bunch of made-up bullshit and refuses to publish the article. Lois then tries to track down Clark and conduct interviews with the people of Smallville to see if they witnessed anything abnormal in the town over the years, and it turns out they did. When one of the kids on the bus that fell into the river, who is now a grown adult working at a fucking IHOP, tells her about the incident. Oh, and this movie has product placement like you wouldn't believe. Especially when Zod and his forces attack Smallville, and there's a huge battle that takes place. That's more product placement than Jurassic World. While I'm at it, I may as well go to the nearest Target in my Sonic the Hedgehog bathrobe and buy myself a bag of Doritos and a can of Dr. Pepper. How's that for product placement? Just then, the ship winds up in another spot in the Arctic. This is where Clark first dons the Superman suit, while also learning where he came from and how Krypton was destroyed, and Jor-El murdered by General Zod. He isn't referred to as Superman until the third act of the film, when the World Engine practically destroys Metropolis, and Superman gets the short end of the stick in Batman v Superman. And that's why Batman has beef with Superman in the first place. And while Lois is conducting interviews all throughout Smallville, she drops the story altogether when she learns about Jonathan's sacrifice in the tornado that took his life, after coming face to face with Clark for the very first time. But she's suspended for publishing the article that she was advised not to do, but Perry then commends her for dropping the whole Clark Kent story. And as Clark visits his adopted mother in Smallville to tell her that he discovered where he came from, we see that, oh fuck! Zod and his forces have returned and are ready to fuck shit up. Zod even broadcasts a threat to the world by taking over random televisions and causing planet-wide blackouts, kinda like the movie Poltergeist.
Excuse me, we did not order a poltergeist.
Zod says to hand over one of their own in 24 hours. Otherwise, bad shit will happen. And I think you know what that bad shit is. Their plan is to turn Earth into another Krypton by practically destroying it, resulting in the extinction of humanity. And how do they plan to achieve that, you may ask? With the World Engine. Lois is then approached by the FBI for questioning, and is being held in custody by the Army. Superman then approaches her at the military base, willing to turn himself into Zod, and in return, Lois goes free. She then asks him about the S on his suit, and he reveals to her that it's not an S, but is in fact the Kryptonian symbol of hope. And like I said, he isn't referred to as Superman until the film's climax, and he assures the people behind the one-way mirror that he is not their enemy, but he's afraid of Zod's intentions. And then, in come the Kryptonians who take Superman and Lois onto their ship, where Lois has to wear some kind of protective gear in order to breathe, while Superman doesn't need it. While they're aboard, Superman hands Lois the command key that was used on the ship in the Arctic a few scenes earlier. And then, it appears that Superman is having trouble breathing on the ship as he is adjusting to the Kryptonian ship's atmosphere since he spent his entire life on Earth. And then, Zod reveals his plan to Superman. I mentioned this earlier, but he plans to turn Earth into another Krypton by causing global extinction, and they need the Codex in his genes to carry out this plan. He also tells them that they were freed from the Phantom Zone, following the destruction of Krypton, that by activating the scout ship in the Arctic, Superman inadvertently sent a signal to Zod and his forces that they were able to locate the last son of Krypton. Superman is obviously against this plan, but Zod just isn't buying it. He'll terraform the planet by any means necessary. Lois is then thrown into a cell in which she escapes with the key that Clark gives her. The key allowed the atmosphere to change, so that she can breathe without the apparatus, while the Kryptonians have trouble, and she escapes all with the help of Russell Crowe himself. But her escape pod is damaged by laser fire, so Superman has to save her before she meets an untimely fate. And then things go from bad to worse when Martha is approached by Zod, asking about the ship he arrived to Earth in, and the Codex needed to bring about a new Krypton. When he threatens Martha, Superman gets so pissed and races to save her, resulting in a battle in the center of Smallville, in which the product placement gets out of hand. There's too many examples to count here! After the battle, the military deems Superman is not their enemy, but then it's too late when the World Engine appears above Metropolis and begins to lay waste. Now, this is my biggest issue with Man of Steel. All the destruction the city sustained during the attack. Buildings toppled, people dying, and the whole city in ashes. I wonder how long it took to rebuild during the events of Batman v Superman. And the worst part is that Bruce Wayne was there during the whole thing, and we don't see him until Batman v Superman. We also see a brief look at the LexCorp logo during the final confrontation between Superman and Zod. Before the attack on Metropolis, Zod is informed about what actually happened to the Codex. It is in Superman's genes that he does not need to be alive in order to extract it. The World Engine touches down near the South Indian Ocean, where the kryptonite was discovered at the beginning of Batman v Superman, while Zod's ship floats above Metropolis ready to fuck shit up. Superman destroys the terraforming platform while the military launches an attack on the Kryptonians, sending Zod's forces back to the Phantom Zone. And after the World Engine is destroyed, and with all hope of reviving Krypton gone, an enraged Zod plans to destroy Earth out of revenge. And then, one last battle between Superman and Zod, in which more collateral damage is caused. And this is when Superman gets the short end of the stick in Batman v Superman. And the thing about this movie that bothered me the most is Zod's fate. Superman snaps his fucking neck as he tries to kill an innocent family at a train station. That's the last we see of Michael Shannon as General Zod, until The Flash. Not only did this bother me, Superman snapping Zod's fucking neck, but it also bothered a lot of other people as well. There's a difference between Superman and Homelander. Homelander takes pleasure in slaughtering people, leaving them with severed limbs and in a bloody mess. Superman is the exact opposite. Homelander takes pleasure in snapping people's necks with his compound V-induced strength. But Superman did what he had to do to stop innocent people from dying. And after Superman brings the drone down to Earth, one of the generals played by Henry Lennox asked him if he was effing stupid.
Are you effing stupid?
Oh, believe me, in a franchise consisting of R-rated entries, I would have expected him to say, "Are you fucking stupid?" I mean, there was only one PG-13 rated DCEU movie that got away with the one fuck rule. And that, my friends, is The Flash, or as I like to call it, The Flush. So now, Clark Kent has now accepted his life on Earth, and he accepts a job at the Daily Planet, working alongside Lois Lane. And that's the end of the movie. I'm giving Man of Steel a 7 out of 10. While not my personal favorite Superman movie, it was a pretty solid take on the character. However, I do have a few gripes with this movie. For one, the final battle and the fate of the villain. Henry Cavill was a pretty good choice to play Superman at the time, although when this movie first came out, audiences and critics were divided. My all-time favorite Superman will always be Christopher Reeve, even though I've only seen the 1978 Superman movie and Superman 2. As of this video's upload, I have not seen Superman 3 or Superman 4 The Quest for Peace, but I do plan on reviewing those when it comes time to prepare for James Gunn's Superman with David Cornsweet as Superman, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, and Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, to name a few. I do plan on reviewing all 4 of Christopher Reeve's Superman films and Superman Returns. I'm just gonna say this right now, Zack Snyder is not my personal favorite director, and I wouldn't go out of my way to watch his entire filmography, especially with the Rebel Moon duology of Netflix films, which I heard were fucking horrendous. But Man of Steel was not his first DC outing. In 2009, he directed Watchmen, which I've heard divided audiences the world over. Production on Watchmen was an absolute nightmare as it was in development hell for years, as it was deemed unfilmable. Now, I am not familiar with Watchmen myself, be it the limited comic book series, the 2009 film, the 2019 HBO series, and the most recent animated film adaptation. But I am willing to check it out someday. Anyway, back onto my closing thoughts on Man of Steel. The cast all did good, especially Henry Cavill and Amy Adams. However, I felt that this movie had some flaws. For one, the final act, and for another, the fucking product placement in the Smallville battle scene. That's more blatant product placement than Wayne's World and Jurassic World combined. And there is some religious allegory revolving around Superman's portrayal in this movie, especially since Superman is seen as a god, and is often compared to Jesus Christ. And the religious allegory continues in Batman v Superman, which I will talk about next. So all in all, Man of Steel is a solid adaptation and a solid reboot of the tale of Superman. However, this is only the beginning for the DC Extended Universe, a universe doomed to fail. Because after Man of Steel, this franchise became a mixed bag full of flops and successes, but mostly flops in its autumn years. And with the next movie, I will talk about how convoluted and messy the story has become in setting up the Justice League, as it tried way too hard to rival the MCU and the Avengers. With that said, stay tuned for my upcoming review of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice coming soon. For Batman v Superman, it will not be 2 videos with each video covering the theatrical cut versus the 3-hour R-rated Ultimate Edition. Instead, I'll talk about them both in the same video. Till then, I'll see you all next time.